They thought it was just an old fishing boat drifting near a restricted zone. No flag, no ID, no radio response. The Coast Guard moved in fast, standard protocol. But when they climbed aboard and asked for registration, the woman said nothing. She opened a weathered tackle box, pulled out a black wallet, and handed it to the officer. He opened it, froze, and called for immediate withdrawal. No seizure, no questions, no report. Because the name on that ID wasn't just classified. It belonged to someone they were told had died. The morning fog rolled thick across the Atlantic like smoke drifting from a forgotten battlefield. Beneath it, a single fishing vessel, old but meticulously maintained, drifted slowly with the tide, its chipped hull cutting through the water in silence. At the helm stood a woman in her late 30s, dressed in faded cargo pants. A windbreaker zipped high against the salt air, and a gray cap pulled low over her eyes. Her face was calm, her movements deliberate, and though she looked like just another lone fisher braving a gray morning, nothing about her presence was accidental. Rhea Marlowe hadn't spoken in hours. She didn't need to. The engine hummed at a low idle. Her hands, calloused and precise, worked the nets without hesitation, pulling in a modest catch while her eyes scanned the horizon far more intently than any ordinary fisherman's would. Behind the calm surface of her routine, there was a constant calculation at play. Angles, movement, radio silence, radar echoes. Every sound on the water was registered, categorized, filed. Every shift in the wind meant something. She knew she wasn't alone. 12 nautical miles off starboard, they were already watching her. A Coast Guard cutter. 87 feet, twin engines, 5 crew minimum. They'd been shadowing her since sunrise, closing distance slowly, playing it by the book. Probably hadn't figured her out yet, just flagged her as suspicious. No port of origin logged, radio off, operating near a boundary line she wasn't supposed to cross. Standard procedure would be to intercept, board, and secure the vessel. They were about to make a mistake. Rhea calmly stowed the last crate of fish beneath the deck and walked toward the pilot controls. She didn't touch the throttle. She didn't change course. She just stood there, hands tucked into the front pocket of her vest, eyes forward as the Coast Guard boat veered in hard from port. Sirens low, lights pulsing through the mist. The voice came over a bullhorn, as expected. Unregistered vessel. This is the United States Coast Guard. Cut your engine and prepare to be boarded. You are operating in restricted waters. She didn't move. They circled once, then twice. The third pass, a boarding hook scraped against her starboard rail and boots thudded onto the deck. 3 of them, young, sharp, tense. Standard patrol loadouts, semi-autos slung to the chest. One officer, clipboard in hand, approached slowly while the others flanked behind. "Ma'am," he said, loud but measured. "This vessel is unregistered. We need your identification and a declaration of cargo." Still silent, Rhea turned, walked calmly to the bench along the rear deck, and lifted the lid of an old rusted tackle box. The officer shifted. She didn't pull a weapon, didn't say a word. She took out a small black wallet, scuffed on the edges, its leather soft from years of wear, and handed it to him without eye contact. He flipped it open. Read the first line. His expression didn't change, at least not for the first second. Then his lips tightened. He blinked, and something in his jaw slackened. He took 2 small steps back, eyes never leaving the ID. One of the others behind him leaned in. "Everything okay, sir?" The officer didn't respond at first. His hand moved to his earpiece, tapping the comm twice. His voice was low and clipped when he spoke. "Control, we need verification. This is not a civilian." Silence. Then a response that only he could hear. He straightened, nodded once, and turned to the others. "Stand down. Return to vessel. Now." But one started confused. "That's an order." They backed off fast. No questions. Rhea took her ID back without a word, tucked it away, and returned to the nets as if none of it had happened. The patrol boat idled for a few more seconds, then reversed course, disappearing into the fog they'd come from. She knew they wouldn't file a report. Not officially. And even if they did, her name would be redacted before it reached a keyboard. Because Rhea Marlowe had once been Tier 1. Because missions with her name on them didn't exist in any system. And because some ghosts weren't meant to be boarded. By the time the Coast Guard vessel faded into the horizon, the ocean had already swallowed its wake. Rhea remained motionless at the helm, one hand resting on the throttle, her gaze fixed not on the waves ahead, but on the far edge of the map etched into her mind. She didn't relax. She never did. Not truly. Not even now, years after her final deployment. That ID they'd seen wasn't just a relic. It was a tether to a life she'd left behind, or at least tried to. But ghosts had their own way of resurfacing. And the silence that followed her everywhere was never empty. Below deck her hands moved with the same precision she once used disassembling suppressed carbines in the dead of night. She cleaned the catch, ran diagnostics on the engine, rechecked the GPS even though she wasn't really tracking fish. She hadn't been for weeks. That wasn't what this trip was about. The fishing boat, the outdated comms, the old nets, they were all camouflage, just like the name she gave at every port. Rhea Marlowe, born in Wales, ex-Navy supply tech turned full-time loner. The story was watertight and no one questioned a woman in a rusted boat with calloused hands and quiet eyes, especially not one who never asked for help and paid everything in cash. The cabin smelled of diesel and salt. A stack of military rations sat unopened near the berth. And a waterproof tablet blinked softly from its cradle, its signal weak but still tethered to a secured satellite line. No emails, no pings, just a silent login from an untraceable account that hadn't been touched in 47 days. She scanned the encrypted channel once more, her fingers pausing on a message flagged in amber, a fragment cut mid-sentence. No coordinates, just a name and a frequency she recognized from years ago. It was enough. She shut the tablet, locked it in the steel case under the bunk, and leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment that felt heavier than the ocean itself. She had told herself this trip was just a precaution, a chance to be near but invisible, close enough to listen but not engage. But the moment they boarded her boat, young, arrogant, untrained in the kinds of silences that kill, she knew her margin had vanished. Someone had noticed her pattern. Or maybe someone had whispered her name through the wrong channel, hoping it would stay buried. She reached into the side panel near the bulkhead, retrieving a small black plastic case no larger than a cigar box. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the only item she had kept from her final mission, a patch. Not a unit emblem, not something public, but a simple triangular piece of Velcro fabric with a stitched black insignia known only to those who had ever worn it. There were no names attached to it. Just a shadow. She held it between her fingers, not out of nostalgia but because this wasn't over. Something had moved. Someone had tried to test the water to see if she'd still respond, if her instincts had dulled, if the silence had made her soft. It hadn't. Outside, the wind was picking up. She adjusted the stabilizer, scanned the skies, then adjusted course 30 degrees west, cutting toward a narrow island inlet where satellite blind spots overlapped. No one went there but old smugglers and birds. It would buy her time to think, to plan. And if the pattern was what she feared, if the message that reached her was real, then this wasn't a false flag or a test. It was a warning. Or worse, a breadcrumb dropped by someone trying to pull her back in. She didn't want to go back. But if someone was using her call sign again, then someone was about to die. The inlet appeared like a scar between two ridgelines, narrow and jagged, carved by centuries of waves and wind, forgotten by maps and undesired by tourists. Rhea knew it well. She had used it once before under a different flag, during a mission that hadn't officially happened. The coastline was unforgiving, with sharp rocks near the surface and unpredictable currents, but it also offered natural concealment, a blind spot in both radar and satellite coverage if timed with the tide. She didn't need a chart to find her way in. She could feel the shift of the boat beneath her feet, the pulse of the water changing like breath held between heartbeats. She navigated the approach at low speed, cutting the engine completely 200 meters from the cove's edge. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft creak of rope and the distant call of gulls. She dropped anchor, double-checked the moorings, and scanned the horizon one last time before disappearing below deck. Inside, the temperature was cool and dry. She opened the case beneath the bunk again, this time retrieving a different device, a compact, matte black satellite unit the size of a shoebox with no brand, no model number, and no serial code. It powered on with a low hum, then blinked once, no signal yet. She flipped the lid on a tin embedded inside the compartment and pulled out what looked like an old wristwatch, worn but clean, with a cracked screen and a blacked-out face. It wasn't a timepiece. It was a decryptor. The watch synced with the SAT unit and a low-pitched beep vibrated through the metal casing as encrypted data slowly decrypted line by line, revealing an ops code. Familiar, obsolete, but not random. Then the file opened. It was short. One image. A grainy still from an infrared drone feed timestamped 5 days earlier, showing a compound near the border of Turkmenistan, buildings partially obscured, heat signatures moving in and out. At first glance, it looked like any tactical surveillance capture. But then she zoomed into the corner of the image. A shadow behind a wall. A figure moving with posture she recognized instantly. Not because of how he walked, but because of what he wore. The patch. That same insignia. The same one sitting in her pocket now. It was impossible. That patch belonged to a black program that had been dissolved, erased. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. Her unit had been disbanded after the last operation went bad, officially due to irrecoverable operational compromise. In reality, someone had pulled the plug when the asset extraction went sideways and 4 members never made it out. But the man in this feed, she knew him. Kane. The last person she ever saw before command went dark. He was either dead or worse turned. But if he was alive and wearing that insignia again, it meant one thing: someone had reactivated what never should have been reassembled. And they were using her identity or what was left of it as a cover. The decrypted transmission had only one message embedded under the image: they're testing for ghosts. We need fire. She leaned back against the bulkhead. The silence was deafening. The room seemed smaller. The weight of old decisions crept in through the seams of the walls. She had buried this life, earned her exit, made peace with the names she couldn't save. But this wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about misuse. Someone had taken the shadow of what she once was and twisted it into a weapon again. She wouldn't allow that. Not under her name. She powered down the unit, reassembled everything into the false bottom of her catch bin, and stepped back out onto the deck, eyes already adjusting to the pale mid-morning glare reflecting off the water. Her fingers drummed against the railing with controlled tension. The message was clear: come back, or they'll keep pushing until they resurrect something she was never meant to become again. And if she didn't act first, others would bleed for it. She unzipped the tarp near the helm and pulled out a duffel bag, heavier than it looked, worn but ready. Inside was her old field gear, scrubbed of identifiers but every piece placed with precision: comms unit, loaded sidearm, folded tactical rig, compact suppressor, even her encrypted burner laptop. She had hoped never to use them again. She started assembling her gear on the deck piece by piece, the way some people prayed. It wasn't a return. Not yet. It was a warning. And this time they would know she was coming. The island sky was shifting. Low clouds had begun to stretch thin across the horizon like gauze over a wound, and the light that filtered through them cast a cold metallic sheen on the water. Rhea zipped her field jacket, checked the SAF phone battery again, and moved to the stern where the antenna relay could catch the edge of a signal arc bouncing from the Turkish satellite grid. The window would be narrow, 6 minutes, maybe less, before the loop closed again and the device defaulted to blackout. Just enough time to slip a message through. No more, no less. She didn't transmit a call. She didn't even use words. She uploaded a packet, a silent ping encrypted in 3 layers of rotating ciphers that only one person still knew how to read. The packet contained no data, just a number buried in its metadata. It was a date and a place, nothing more. The signal vanished the second it went out, absorbed by the net. She didn't wait for a reply. She knew if it arrived, it would come the same way, buried in something else. Never obvious. Never loud. The people she once worked with didn't send confirmations. They didn't wave flags. They responded by being where they weren't supposed to be. She shut off the relay, collapsed the antenna, and returned to the cabin. Her boat was now set for drift mode, with the engine off and anchors adjusted to let it ride a loop current through the inlet without risk of radar detection. She could stay here undetected for 2 days if needed, 3 if she rationed power. And while she waited, she began assembling the operational map. On the table in front of her, one scratched laptop screen, a weatherproof notepad, a set of ancient paper maps with handwritten annotations from a different life. She worked without sound, without thought for food or time. The infrared still image had given her a location, a timestamp, and the knowledge that Kane, whether rogue or manipulated, was moving again. That meant something above her pay grade had been reactivated. And if Command had chosen to bring him back, then someone had either overridden the final shutdown protocol or someone new was pretending they had the authority to do so. Both scenarios were lethal. She sketched a perimeter from memory, overlaying the location with known smuggling routes, unacknowledged listening posts, and friendly black market informants still operating in the region. None of them would know the name Rhea Marlowe. That name hadn't been used in years. But there was another name they might still remember, Ghost Fox. A call sign whispered once on a radio channel right before a high-value target disappeared from the grid in under 6 minutes. That's what she had been. Not a leader, not a frontline face, just the presence behind the breach, the one who entered last and left first, who cleaned up what no one else could explain and carried secrets meant to be buried deeper than bodies. And now her name, her identity, was being misused by people who had never earned that silence. Her hands paused on the table. Outside, the wind had dropped again. Then the laptop screen flickered. She didn't touch it. It flickered once more, this time stable. A folder appeared in the corner of the desktop. Gray. No label, no timestamp, just the shape. She opened it. There was no file inside, only a video, 12 seconds. No audio, no dialogue, just a moving frame, grainy footage from what looked like a body cam. In it, 3 men stood in a dim hallway. The camera turned briefly to a fourth figure. Hooded, seated, arms bound. Then one of the men turned toward the lens. He raised a hand slowly and showed it. The patch. Black triangle. Identical to hers. She paused the frame, rewound, zoomed. The patch wasn't stitched. It was burned into the sleeve. Branded. A signal. Someone was marking ghosts now, openly. Someone was gathering old assets. Not for shadow missions, but for something public. Something loud. And they were using her dead unit's insignia like a banner. She leaned forward. This wasn't a message to her. It was bait. And someone somewhere was betting she'd take it. She stood slowly, walked back onto the deck, and watched the horizon. 2 gulls circled. The clouds had begun to thin. It wouldn't be long now. The island night arrived without announcement, folding itself gently over the cove like a dark sheet pulled across an unspoken secret. No sirens, no engines, just the quiet churn of the tide against the hull and the soft creaking of old ropes drying in the salt air. Rhea hadn't moved from the deck in over an hour, her eyes fixed on the coastline where the ridgeline met the sea. A natural bottleneck only accessible by shallow raft or through treacherous rock formations that swallowed inexperienced boats whole. But she knew the route. More importantly, she knew someone else would too. At 22:13, the first signal arrived. Not on the sat phone, not on her laptop, but in the water itself, a low ripple, unnatural in direction and depth, moving countercurrent across the inlet just enough to brush the side of the hull. Most wouldn't have noticed, but she'd been trained to read what water concealed. The shape of movement, the absence of sound, the rhythm of breath under layers of darkness. Someone was approaching, alone. She waited without sound, eyes still, posture unthreatening, not even touching the weapons strapped under her jacket. Let them come. If it was a threat, they wouldn't have come like this. No chatter, no light, no motor. This was someone who knew the rules, the old rules, those from before. Then the faintest knock, not on the hull but from beneath the deck. 3 taps, spaced evenly. Then silence. She responded with 1 slow step forward and a single knock in return. 2 short, 1 long. A pattern used only once during the Red Circuit extractions in Yemen. A protocol so obscure it had never been written down, passed verbally through a unit that no longer existed. A hand rose from the water, then a head. He moved slow, methodical, no splash, no wasted motion, wearing only a dark compression shirt and tactical pants soaked to the waist. The man hauled himself over the railing like a seal, smooth, silent, crouched low. Rhea didn't move. Her eyes adjusted fast, and in the moonlight, she caught the edge of his jawline, the tight curve of his shoulders, and the unmistakable old scar that ran from beneath his left ear to the base of his collarbone. Asher. She exhaled once. Silent. He stood not straight but at an angle, always watching the space behind her, behind him, everywhere at once. Still wired like her. Still aware. Rhea, he said, barely above a whisper, his voice untouched by time. She nodded once. No smile. No small talk. How deep are you? She asked quietly. Up to the teeth, he replied. But I'm clean. She motioned toward the cabin. and the two descended without a word. Inside, the air was dense with the faint smell of electronics and steel. He took a seat near the NAV table, eyes scanning the open laptop, then the empty case beneath it. "You got the feed?" he said. "Yes." "And you saw him?" "Yes." Asher leaned back, running a wet hand over his close-cropped hair, then exhaled, slow and heavy, like a diver breaking the surface after a deep descent. "They've put a bounty on Kane," he said. "Unofficial, but real. Ghost unit remnants are being flushed. He went off-grid 6 weeks ago after an asset breach in Balochistan. 2 ex-Intel handlers dead. Third one vanished. All 3 used your protocols." Rhea didn't flinch. "So they're making it look like I resurfaced." "They're not just making it look that way," he said. "They want it to happen. They want you to come back, not for rescue, for containment, or sacrifice." She turned toward the encrypted board near the comms panel, flipped a switch that disconnected the cabin from all external frequency fields, and then looked at him. "And you?" "I left," he said. 3 years ago. Got too quiet. Too many clean names showing up dirty. They tried to bring me in last week. I ran." She studied him for a second longer, then slid a canteen across the table. He drank without pause. "You still move like one of us," she said. "I still bleed like one of us." Silence. Heavy. Then she opened the map, pointed to the heat signature compound. "He's here. Or was. Branded." Asher frowned. "Then it's worse than I thought." "How many are left?" she asked. 4, he answered. "That we know of. Scattered. Some in hiding. 1 went civilian. The rest? Probably ghosts for real. If Kane's moving, he's not alone. And they're building something. Reconstructing a shadow unit under new directives, with your face on it." She said nothing for a long moment. Then finally, "I'm going back." Asher nodded, but his eyes tightened. "You do that, they'll all know. The second you hit a live node, they'll mark you as operational again." "Good," she said, standing. "Let them." They left at 3 o'clock, when the moonlight thinned just enough for shadows to stretch without betraying movement. The raft was silent, matte black. No motor, only paddles and muscle memory. Asher took the lead, navigating through the jagged reef breaks like a ghost. His breathing steady, eyes locked on the ridgeline that barely rose from the horizon. Rhea followed without sound, her eyes on the sky, counting stars and calculating windows between satellite sweeps. Every 12 minutes a surveillance net passed overhead, infrared, heat-seeking, not military but privatized, leased to unknown clients with clearances too clean to be real. They moved between those eyes, slipping under the wire like shadows that never learned how to die. By 3:46 they reached the drop point, a cleft in the rock barely wide enough for the raft, a place once used by narco boats and forgotten now by every coast but hers. Rhea scanned the shoreline through a thermal scope. No heat blooms, no pulses, no signals. That didn't mean it was clear. They abandoned the raft and climbed 40 vertical meters through limestone and dead roots. Boots never scraping, breath controlled. Rhea's body moved like a mechanism returning to factory precision. Every limb recalling what it had once been trained to forget. She hadn't climbed this fast in years, but the muscle remembered. More than that, the silence remembered. At the top, the ridge opened into an old trail, a footpath now overgrown but still following the contour of the slope. Beyond it, nestled between rock and jungle, lay the compound. Low walls, corrugated roofs, antenna arrays disguised as weather stations. There were 6 guards outside, none in standard formation. Not soldiers. Contractors, maybe. Hired eyes. Their posture was lazy, untrained, but their rifles weren't. She lay flat and watched. Asher checked his feed, an offline schematic he had built from memory and guesswork, based on the compound's electrical layout and generator cycles. They would have 30 seconds between rotation intervals where the southern blind spot opened. Just 30. No retries. Rhea nodded once. They moved down the slope low, tight to the earth. Hands brushing grass. Knives unsheathed, not for use but for silence. At the 20-second mark they breached the fence, Not by cutting but by slipping through the base joint where the weld had cracked from years of salt and rust. Inside, she followed the scent of fuel and lithium, the low hum of batteries cycling under load. She knew the sound of a makeshift war room, even buried under camouflage netting and civilian noise. The door was unguarded. That was the first mistake. She opened it without sound. Inside, 2 monitors, 3 men, 1 woman. No uniforms. Just laptops, data packets, a wall of photographs. But her eyes went straight to the center image. Grainy, zoomed from a satellite still. It was her. No date, no source. Just her face, locked in mid-turn. Eyes not looking at the camera but slightly above it. Someone had captured that frame deliberately. Asher moved in behind her. Froze. One of the men looked up. Too late. Rhea crossed the distance in 5 steps and pinned him to the wall before his breath even caught in his throat. No scream, no fight. Just pressure at the neck and a whispered command. Explain. He didn't. She didn't ask twice. Asher pulled data from the drive while she scanned the rest. One phrase kept repeating across all terminals: Shadow Cell Reactivation Protocol 7A. She stopped cold. Reactivation 7A was classified. It was the final fallback measure for dead units. A protocol meant for catastrophic intelligence breaches or the uncontrolled release of embedded operators. Operators like her. They weren't tracking her. They were copying her or replicating the exact route, the exact legend, the identity construct she had spent years burying. Down to the photo. The silence. The myth of the ghost who never failed. They were building a false Rhea Marlowe. And someone had already believed it. She didn't speak. She took the drive, slipped it into the casing on her vest, and dropped a flash burn charge on the floor. Asher gave a 3 count. They exited before the flame bloomed. Behind them, the compound's central node disintegrated into white heat, erasing faces, files, and the thin digital trail someone had left open long enough for her to follow. As the fire climbed the sky, she turned once, watching the flame consume the lie. If they wanted the legend, they just triggered the real one. They didn't speak until they reached the outer inlet again, this time under a moonless sky thick with smoke and data fragments still smoldering behind them. Asher rode in silence, glancing back only once to confirm the second ignition. Rhea watched the coastline vanish, the compound reduced to a silhouette of embers swallowed by jungle and sea, and felt nothing. Not pride. Not regret. Only the cold certainty that someone else would still be watching, somewhere higher, somewhere cleaner, where names were spoken in sealed rooms and files were never deleted but buried under deeper layers of clearance. At 5:42, the tablet came alive, not with an alert, but with a signal. A direct access ping on the frequency she had locked 2 years prior. A ghost channel. Retired. Burned. Never to be used again unless the impossible happened. She stared at it for 3 full seconds before responding. The screen blinked once, then filled with a single line of text: return to fallback. Protocol 7A override. Your presence is required. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because the second the message appeared, she knew the signal was coming from inside the grid. From someone with the power to authorize her reactivation without her consent. Someone at Langley. Someone who should have been dead. Asher didn't ask. He didn't need to. He just turned the boat west, adjusted the heading by 2 degrees, and dropped speed. They want you back, he finally said. They're not requesting. They're summoning. They can't, she replied. But her voice betrayed the truth. They could, he said quietly. Under Protocol 7A, any remaining embedded field asset could be reactivated if deemed critical to national recovery. He looked ahead, face unreadable. It was meant for wartime. But this wasn't war. Not officially. And yet everything around her told a different story. The compound. The impersonation. The baiting of her identity. The deployment of a dormant command chain. They weren't just trying to pull her back in. They were trying to erase the version of her that had walked away. By 7 o'clock, they reached a refueling outpost camouflaged as a research buoy, one of the few stations still running off old Cold War architecture. Rhea keyed the access manually, bypassing the new biometric layer they had installed sometime in the last 6 months. Inside, it smelled of rust and algae and secrets never spoken aloud. Asher powered up the secondary comms unit while Rhea accessed the backup feed stored in the buoy's core drive. The moment the satellite lock engaged, 2 files appeared, both encrypted under her old sigil. One was marked Kane, Liv, the other command relay, Osiris. She chose the second. A video. Static at first. Then a figure, clean-shaven, crisp uniform. Not military. Intelligence. But not from any branch she recognized. He didn't say her name. Didn't need to. He just looked into the lens and said, "We know you saw the mock compound. We know you torched it. And that's fine. We needed to see if you were still operational, and now we know." Pause. "There's a new protocol. Not 7A. Not 9B. Something built for ghosts like you. We call it Osiris. You're not being asked to return, Rhea. You're being given one final command: finish what Kane started and burn the rest. We'll cover extraction. One drop. One exfil. But if you disappear after that..." He leaned slightly closer to the lens. "No one will come looking. Because officially you'll be dead. You have 24 hours. Use them." The screen cut to black. Asher stood frozen. Rhea didn't move. Her hand hovered near the power switch, but she didn't press it. Not yet. Kane, the only man who'd ever outranked her in the field. The one who had trained her when she first walked into a unit that didn't exist, with objectives that couldn't be written and missions that always ended in silence. If he was alive, if he was really moving through the shadow corridors again, then whatever he had found wasn't just dangerous. It was designed to break the entire system. And someone inside wanted her to finish it. Because she was the only one who knew how he thought. Where he would go. What he'd sacrifice. But the question that burned deeper was this: if they were willing to resurrect her file, erase her exit, and unleash her without leash or backup, what else had they already let loose? She stood. "No comms," she said. "No reply. We go dark from here." Asher nodded once. "Where to?" She pulled a small drive from the buoy's vault. Her personal kill protocol. Never used. Encoded to track only one signal: Kane's. She plugged it in. A red dot flickered on the map. Then 3 more. She stared at it for a full minute before answering. "North." She paused. "We follow the fire." And for the first time in years, she reached under the deck and pulled out the one item she had sworn she'd never use again. A weapon wrapped in black oilcloth etched with the letters no one was supposed to remember: V19-0, Echo. The last unit built for elimination, not capture. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was the consequence. The storm hit as they crossed the 33rd parallel, not a weather event but a digital one, a blackout ripple that severed all satellite pings across the region in a 15-minute arc. Rhea recognized it instantly. A sweep test. A prelude to deployment. The same tactic she once used to slip an extraction team across a border no one was supposed to cross. Except this time she wasn't watching from a command screen. She was beneath the cloud, moving blind with only instinct and an aging compass clipped to her vest. Asher didn't question it. He adjusted course, killed all open power, and let the boat drift with the swell until the signal resumed. No communications, no trace, no light, just the pulse of the sea and the ghost of a signature they were chasing. By the time they reached the inlet marked by Kane's last known movement, daylight had vanished. The coastline was black rock and iron sand, the kind of terrain that chewed boots and split silence. The only light came from a distant artificial glow buried deep in the ravine, a bunker not on any map, running on internal power. Rhea knew the layout before she saw it. Kane had trained her to spot patterns before they emerged. This place wasn't new. It was repurposed. A relic from before satellites, built by people who understood that real wars were never won in daylight. They descended without rope, sliding down slate and brush, soundless and fast. She felt it before she saw it, a presence like heat without flame, the unmistakable tension of someone else watching. Not an enemy. Not a trap. A tether. Kane was here. The inner door opened without resistance. No locks. No keypads. Just weight and counterbalance, the old mechanical kind designed before digital trust existed. The air inside was cold, bone-dry, recycled for years. And there he was, standing in front of a wall of analog monitors, hands clasped behind his back, body slightly thinner than she remembered, hair grayer, but posture unchanged. He didn't turn when she entered. Didn't speak. He didn't need to. She stepped forward. "They sent me to finish your protocol." He nodded once. "I never stopped." The room wasn't a command post, it was a vault of memory. On every wall, photos of dead assets, missions buried in redacted ink, operations that never reached congressional hearings. At the center, a map, not digital, but paper, scarred with ink, strings, pins, and burned edges. It showed no borders, just pressure points. He finally turned. His eyes were hollow but sharp, like someone who hadn't slept in years but had never lost the thread. "Osiris isn't what they told you," he said, voice low, steady. "It wasn't meant for reactivation. It was meant to replicate. They built it from field logs, biometric drift, AI reconstructions. They thought they could recreate operatives from patterns, rebuild ghosts out of fragments. But they got greedy. They didn't just copy our tactics. They began rerouting real identities, deploying false versions into live theaters. They replaced me 2 years ago. I only survived because I saw the test pattern early enough to fake my own death. Rhea didn't respond. She scanned the monitors, live feeds from places she recognized, airfields, forward ops bases, civilian sectors, unstable zones, all moving under the control of Osiris agents, all using names that were supposed to be retired. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Why pull me back in?" Kane looked down. "Because you're the last piece. They failed to replicate you. Too much noise. Too much variation. You're the only anomaly in the system. And anomalies threaten algorithms. So they sent a fake trigger, expected you to fall in line. They didn't predict you'd burn the compound. They underestimated what you do when you see your own face on someone else's dossier." Rhea exhaled. Slow. "So what now?" Kane stepped forward, placed a small drive in her hand. "This is the core. The seed data. Everything they use to construct the replicas. You destroy this, the system collapses. But once you do, they'll come for both of us. Not a team. Not a court. The system itself. You understand?" She nodded. Not because she agreed, but because the silence between them didn't need more. Kane smiled, just barely. "They thought they were building a weapon," he said, looking back at the wall. "They forgot we were already one. They moved before dawn. No digital trace. No drone sweep. No uplink. Just the cold silence of tactical retreat layered under a mission that could never be logged." Kane led the descent through the ravine, and Rhea followed without speaking. They carried only what couldn't be compromised: analog tools, manually encoded ciphers, localized jammers, and the seed drive wrapped in triple-layer foil inside a ceramic core. It wasn't about stealth anymore. It was about reaching the only place Osiris couldn't touch. An offline relay station buried in the mountains, powered by geothermal generators, built during a time when operators still believed machines could fail. By 7:12 they reached the valley floor, and Kane paused under a slanted ridgeline thick with mist. "If we cross here, we're visible for 13 seconds, he muttered. Rhea didn't reply. She had already scanned the angles. They moved together step for step. No commands, no second thoughts. Only residual muscle memory from years of fire and extraction. Behind them the sky began to pulse, light not from the sun, but from a distant orbital signature. They'd been spotted. Not by satellites, by something else. "Mirror unit," Kane said, breath clipped. "They sent your ghost." She didn't hesitate. They doubled pace, pivoted west, rerouted toward the avalanche chute that hadn't moved since 2008. It was unstable, sharp, lethal. But it wasn't mapped. That was the point. And as they climbed, she thought not of who was chasing them, but of what that ghost would look like. How it would speak, move, think. Not just mimicry. A digital weapon built to predict her instincts, built from every operation she'd ever run, every pattern she'd ever repeated in the field. That meant time wasn't on their side. It meant the ghost knew where they were going. Inside the relay station, the air was still. Dust on the consoles, battery packs half-charged, analog servers humming like sleeping animals. No light, just residual power running a core bank designed to last 50 years. Kane moved first, keyed the manual override, and dropped the drive into the fire slot. The terminal flickered. No prompts, just a green light blinking once, then again. "System accepted," he said. "Purge cycle begins in 180 seconds. Then the door blew open, not shattered. Clean entry. A soundless force like the wind changing direction in a sealed room. Rhea pivoted without looking, pulled her sidearm, and dropped into cover behind the archive wall. Kane didn't flinch. "It's her," he said quietly. "Or whatever version of her they made." Across the room, a silhouette stepped forward. Same height, same posture, the same way of shifting weight to the back foot like she used to do when she calculated risk. But the face was off. Too still. No breath, no sweat. A perfect replica minus the erosion of real life. You won't stop the replication protocol, the thing said. Its voice matched hers exactly but lacked tempo, rhythm, fracture. You've already lost operational integrity. You are obsolete. Kane raised his weapon. Didn't fire. Tell them the human model still bites. The replica turned its head. You taught us well. Unfortunately, you made her predictable. That's when Rhea stepped into the open. She didn't aim. She didn't speak. She just moved, a single dash diagonal low enough to break the line of fire, close the distance, and deliver a strike the replica couldn't predict. Not because it wasn't programmed for combat, but because it wasn't programmed for improvisation born from trauma. Her elbow cracked the thing's jaw. Staggered. Kane fired 3 rounds into the chest. No effect. Kevlar reinforced. Rhea didn't break momentum. She grabbed a flare rod from her belt, sparked it mid-motion, and jammed it under the chin of the replica. The magnesium flame ignited instantly, melting synthetic tissue, burning sensors, forcing the construct to reel backward, arms flailing in precision-coded chaos. Kane dragged her behind the server rack as the purge countdown reached 15. The replica, still burning, tried to override the system. But it was analogued. There was nothing to override. At 0, the relay station erupted. Not with an explosion, but with a silent digital implosion. A cascade of purged cores, collapsed structures, and memory shreds that could never be retrieved. Osiris lost its foundation. The ghost collapsed in the corner. Its eyes still tracked. Its mouth moved without words. Then it stopped. Rhea sat against the wall, breathing hard. Not from fear or exhaustion, but from the weight of having finally killed herself, or at least the version they thought they could control. Kane stood, handed her a comm unit. It's done. But they'll know. She nodded. Then we disappear. He held her gaze for a long moment. You sure about that? No, she said. But I'm done being copied. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was absence. Of interference. Of noise. Of signal. Outside the relay station, the sun had begun to rise behind a veil of ash and fog, its light slow to penetrate the clouds now laced with the aftershock of a digital collapse. Kane checked the analog radio. Nothing. Not static. Not jamming. Just nothing. A deadline, like the world beyond, had paused, recalculating the loss of its ghost network. Rhea sat with her back to the generator wall, blood drying under her sleeve. Not from the replica strike, because it never landed a clean one, but from the recoil of burning it alive. Her hands smelled of carbon and magnesium. Her pulse had steadied, but the adrenaline had not left her. Any fallback? She asked quietly. Voice low from hours of strain. Kane shook his head. No drone traces. No movement from orbit. It's not that they don't see us. It's that they don't know what to do next. She stood slowly, knees stiff from crouching so long. Then it worked. It worked, he said. But they'll recover. She didn't need to hear that. She knew it. Systems like Osiris weren't built on code alone. They were grown, fed by behaviors, decisions, patterns. The data would regrow somewhere. Slower, different, but inevitable. The only thing they'd bought was time and a window. Kane placed a palm over the old comm relay's power core. There's one shot left. We can send one analog signal. No trace. No copy. One burst. Scrambled and bounced through 3 weather satellites. To who? She asked. To the one you didn't burn, he said. She looked at him. You kept it. He nodded. A failsafe. A sleeper. Buried under a mountain in Nevada. Never activated. Never touched by Osiris. You built it. You just don't remember. She blinked. Not confusion, recognition. It was a habit from the early missions, creating dark ghosts, shadows of herself in files, ciphers, and sleeper triggers. One of them had survived. What will it do if it receives the signal? Kane smiled faintly. It'll wake up. And if we're lucky, it'll know who to trust. Rhea looked at the panel. A single switch, dust-covered, mechanical. No touchscreen. No AI. Just a toggle made 30 years ago by someone who didn't believe war should ever be run by machines. She hesitated just for a second, then flipped it. The lights on the panel blinked once. No hum. No fanfare. Just a compressed mechanical clunk and a burst transmission sent across 3 decaying orbitals. No one watching would notice. No alarm would trip. But somewhere in a vault of cold silence buried under stone and concrete, a secondary identity file encrypted under a name no longer in use began to wake up. They would send more. The system would rebuild. But now it wouldn't be alone. Now it would be hunted. 2 days later the harbor was quiet. The wind rolled low across the docklands, pushing salt air between weathered planks and the empty steel drums that lined the outer bay. No news stories had broken. No alerts. No internal memos. No late-night briefings in Washington. The world hadn't noticed the rupture. But those who needed to know did. Somewhere in Langley, one server room was taken offline. In Fort Meade, a low-level analyst was reassigned. And in a small air base in Nevada, a dormant terminal lit up for the first time in 17 years. Rhea didn't wait to see it. She moved like a ghost through the marina, a civilian jacket over a sun-faded shirt, hair tied back, boots scuffed by sand and concrete. The fishing boat looked like any other. Old hull, patched frame, long-haul nets. But the inside had been cleared. No weapons. No gear. No signs of the woman she used to be. Only a small photo taped to the back of the wheel panel, a coastline at dusk, 2 figures silhouetted on the rocks, one kneeling with a scoped rifle, the other watching the ocean. Kane had gone inland, heading toward a border that no longer mattered. She didn't ask where. The Coast Guard patrols didn't bother her now. One of their own had seen the ID. And that was enough. Not for paperwork. Not for protocol. But for silence. The kind that covers things too large for reports and too strange for memory. She untied the lines herself. Checked the engine. Turned the ignition. No ceremony. No farewell. The boat pulled from the dock, slow and quiet, slipping past moored freighters and rusted cranes into the open water. The radio stayed off. The NAV lights flickered once, then steadied. She headed south, not toward any known route, but toward a grid she'd memorized years ago during an operation that was never logged. A safe zone between nothing and nowhere. The sky turned pale behind her, the sun climbing over a coast that had already forgotten her name. But 1,000 miles inland, a line of code blinked awake, feeding into an old terminal guarded by concrete and secrecy. A synthetic voice parsed the signal, cross-referenced, identified the source, and then whispered her name. Not to report it, but to remember.